And then after you do your thing, I'll show the webinars and we'll get to more.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cambridge University Press sponsored webinar, The Best of Both Worlds, Concurrent in Person and Virtual Learning. Jenny Blasi and I, Martha Altieri, are delighted to welcome a brand new guest presenter with us this evening to our webinar series, Maureen Gassert Lamb. Maureen teaches at Kingswood Oxford School in West Hartford, Connecticut, where she is the language department chair and the academic technology coordinator. She's also a Google certified trainer, and she's been sharing her work on Latin pedagogy and teaching languages for over 10 years at national, regional, and state conferences. She has won numerous awards during her career, and she's dedicated to creating an inclusive classroom environment. And we are just so thrilled to have her with us this evening. We are meeting via Zoom, as you all know. We are recording this session, and we will have the link available in a few days. And if you need a professional development certificate for this evening's webinar, if you'll just please email us at clctraining@cambridge.org, and we'll get that out to you very quickly.
So today is the third in our series. These are some of the ones that we've had already. They are all up on our YouTube channel under Cambridge University Press Education. I'll put the link in the chat box. So if you missed any of these, they were well worth listening to.
And they can also be found on the NACCP website at cambridgelatin.org.
So here's where we are. We've had Patrick's last week, and Maureen is graciously with us tonight. And then in the next couple of weeks, we have Stephanie Spalding and Sammy Smith, who really want to look at helping your shoulders come down a little bit from your ears, you know, finding ways to do things that are more mellow and possibly things that you can do across your curriculum, and maybe ways to set some different expectations for yourself in a time when things are different than what they normally would be. And then finally, we have the last one before Thanksgiving is Nora Kelly and Sammy Smith have gathered up all kinds of videos and clips that are match up with things in the Cambridge Latin course as a nice way that you don't have to do all that work. They can show you what they have, they can give you ideas, and then they will have a database that they can share. So we're hoping you'll sign up for some of those too. And I will put the link for signing up for these also in the chat. So are we ready now?
No.
Okay, so, all right, so Maureen, we're going to hand it over to you. You're more than welcome to share your screen.
Great, thank you so much. So welcome everyone to the Best of Both Worlds. And just kind of a show of hands, who's a Star Trek fan in here? Oh, good, we have some Star Trek fans. So you know what I'm referencing when I say Best of Both Worlds. Okay, wonderful. So Star Trek, Next Generation, Jean-Luc Picard is captured by the evil Borg. And the Borg are these kind of plugged in humanoid but machine people. And so that's kind of what I feel like when I'm teaching on Zoom, this kind of weird best of both worlds, because on the one hand, I have students who are in person, who are in the classroom, but then again, I have students who are plugged in through Zoom. And so, you know, thinking a little bit about next gen and, you know, conquering new worlds and, you know, exploration, that's what we're doing. We're doing strategies for teaching in person and online students. So if you'd like to follow along with the slide deck, here is a copy of the slide deck. You can go to tinyurl.com/Cambridge Best of Both. So please feel free to follow along. And any of the resources you see in here, anything that you see, I have templates for, I have materials, I am happy to share anything. I mean it when I say email me, contact me on Twitter, anything you'd like, let me know, all right? So this is me. Hi, I'm Maureen Gassert Lamb. I am the Language Department Chair, Academic Technology Coordinator, and Latin, Ancient Greek, and Mythology teacher at the Kingswood Oxford School in West Hartford, Connecticut. I'm also a Google certified trainer, and I train schools on how to effectively use Google tools. I'm also an avid Twitter user at Latin Tech Tools. Feel free to follow me and reach out if you want more information on things. And I also reply to email at latintechtools@gmail.com. So like I said, please, if you want any of these, if you want help with anything, please feel free to reach out. I mean it. Reach out to me. So why the next gen reference? I talked about it a little bit. Use tech to make us stronger, to unite us. And unfortunately, at this point, resistance is futile to this hybrid education, to the idea that we have to be teaching students in person and while they're remote. Although I've learned from my remote students, they really don't like to be called remote students. So what I wrote below is what I call the kids. So some of the students are connected through Zoom, others are in person in the room. So we've got the Zoomers and the Roomers. And so I think that's a more fun way to refer to them, because I feel like remote means so distant. And so trying to get it so it's more connected by calling them students who are Zoomers versus Roomers. And so, yeah, we've got the Zoom and we've got the room. And another thing that's come up a lot in technology, in using technology a lot more this year, is when we center the students who are learning on Zoom, all of the students benefit. All of the students benefit from the organization, from the structure, and from the feedback loop that we have to create to be effective teachers online. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through this. Now, here is what I'm going to try to cover tonight. So the essential elements of hybrid learning, which are organization, community engagement, a feedback loop, assessment, and student choice and voice. Something I want to be mindful of, though, is you may have questions, and it may make the most sense as I'm going through these things for you to ask questions as I'm going over something. I don't feel like it's an interruption. Please ask a question when you have one. I am happy to stop, go over something. We can look at other things. Just let me know what works best for you. This webinar is all about you. Let me know how I can help you. First, we're going to talk a little bit about organization. And I wish my desk were that organized. You'd probably be horrified if you saw what it actually looked like. But when it comes to online learning, it's really important that we can be organized, that we can have a structure and a routine that students can follow. Because if students can't follow along with what's going on, what's the point? And so one of the ways I do this is a wayfinding doc. I got this language from a webinar I was at over the summer, creating a wayfinding doc. And I like the constellation here because it's kind of the North Star for my students. It's what they look at every single day to figure out what we're doing in class. And so I'm not wedded to the name wayfinding doc. If you think of another cool Latin or Greek name I could use, let me know. But that's what I'm calling it for now. So here is what a wayfinding doc looks like for me. Can you all see this? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So I'm honestly at this point unsure of where I got this template. I played with it a lot. And so what this is something I give out every week or two to students. And it has every single day that we're going to cover. For each day, I have the synchronous activities, which are the activities that we do during class, every single one that we're going to do in class that day. Now, I know that these are repeated on Google Classroom. However, I find that students are more likely to find the links if I have everything in one place for one day. So because my Google Classroom is not organized by day, I find that this is a much better way to do this for me. And it may work for you too. You might want to give it a try. And if you want this, a link to this template, let me know. I also have the asynchronous work, which is what I've started calling homework, because students aren't necessarily doing it at home, or they could be doing everything at home. So homework becomes a misnomer. So they have the synchronous work that they do when we're together at a certain time, and then the asynchronous work that they do on their own. And so having links to each of those for each day is great. It's also really helpful for students that are absent for a day. If I have a student that can't make it in for a day, they can go back to this document and they can view every single thing we did in class that day. So they'll know exactly what they missed. And also, if I have a student missing, I will try to link a video of the class that day if there's something important that I went over that I want students to be able to check out. So that's been working out pretty well for me this year to have that. Oh, is there a question? Oh. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, I'm always talking. Can you share with us later how your Google Classroom looks different than your wayfinding doc? Because this is something I've been experimenting with too, and it feels like I'm duplicating things, and maybe that's just the reality. I'm trying to figure that out.
That is so funny. That's what I'm doing next, Katie. You rock. So this is what a sample of a Google Classroom looks like for me. So I have my homework choice boards, I have assessments, I have my end of week check-ins, I have my Zoom link, I have Quizlets, I have homework, past homework, because apparently if I don't put it in past homework, they think it's the homework from that night. Flipgrid, resources, the wayfinding docs, Padlet, academic honesty, review videos. I have a lot of different things on Google Classroom. And sure, is it duplicated in the wayfinding doc? But not by day. Because I don't organize my Google Classroom as a day-by-day thing, you absolutely can do that. And I did that for a year. It was exhausting. So I decided to stop doing that because I do it differently for Google Classroom. That's why I've started using the wayfinding doc. And I know things are duplicated, but students really appreciate having everything in one place. And so that's really the purpose of the wayfinding doc, is to have everything in one place where students can get it for each day.
Follow-up question, Maureen. So one of the things I found last spring, when I created a document like that for the whole week, students would go ahead and do the work before we got to it in class. And then I wasn't sure what to do with them in class, especially when we were in person. Have you found that to be a problem, or?
No, I don't find it to be a problem yet, actually. I found that they sometimes do the asynchronous work, which is the homework ahead of time, but that's fine with me. I don't mind if they get ahead on the homework at all. But when I put the activities from class, they generally know that we're not going to do those activities until they're in class. So because we're meeting synchronously and those are synchronous activities, I haven't had any issues with students doing them before class. That's a really interesting issue though. That's great for your students that they're so gung-ho to do it, but no, I haven't had that yet. I'm not saying it won't come. So last spring, my students said that the #1 thing that they found that was missing from their online learning experience was community engagement. It was engaging with the other students. It was having some social time, even if it's at the beginning of class or the end of class or the middle of class, just some time when they can talk to other students. That could be in Latin, that could be in English, just a way that they can talk to other students. They can have that experience. And I think that students are feeling it really a lot this fall too, for students that are at home, for students that are socially distanced from their friends. They can't really communicate as well as they used to be able to. And masks are limiting too with communication. So trying to figure out ways to let students be social in a way that is socially distant and also engages those students that are at home has been a challenge that I have been trying to meet this year. And here are some ideas I've come up with. The first thing, and one of the most important things I like to do, are introductions and check-ins. And because students are often wearing masks, I think it's really important to give students an opportunity to check in or to do an introduction where they're not wearing a mask. So I have allowed them to do Flipgrids, which I think is really helpful. And you can do this with a lot of different video activities to have students introduce themselves. And so the first day of school, I had students introduce themselves, giving their pronouns, the name that they'd like to be called, and what they wish their superpower might be. And this was really nice. And I only shared the video with the class if the student was comfortable with me sharing the video with the class. I also thought it was really important for me to know the name and the pronouns for each student so that I would know that for the rest of the year and I would be able to engage them with what they'd like to be called. And so that's a really important thing to do. I also have students use Flipgrid for reading in Latin and then summarizing in English. Which is a little bit of a fun twist on what we do regularly for homework, and also for debates and responses. When I do debate responses, students are answering questions, providing Latin evidence to back up their claims, and then students are responding to each other's videos. So that's another idea that you could do for Flipgrid check-ins. And again, this could be something where they go home, they read something for homework, and then they come back in and have this little mini debate, or they have this reading and summarizing on Flipgrid. So that's something I've been doing. Warm-ups. So I think warm-ups are important every day because sometimes students are a little late. Sometimes students need something, they come a little early and they want to work on it, especially with the 15 minutes now between classes. Students show up late, students show up early. And so giving them something to work on before everyone gets there and pairing up students that are there is really fun. One of the things I've been doing a lot is quid placativi. And so you'll notice that I've been using a lot of black background, white writing. That is because it's visually more appealing and also visually less jarring for students who are on Zoom all day. So it's really nice for the color contrast so they can read it more easily. And I also do the directions in a different way than I would do titles. So here I've chosen to do the directions with a white background with black lettering. And I try to do that so it differentiates it for the students to make the directions stand out. And so this was a controversial one. Which did they like better, Marvel or DC? They talked about this one in small groups. And then, so I'll have 3 things per class. The first one, they have to introduce what someone from their group said. The second one, they have to say what they would say. And the third one, they raise their hand. And so I switch up the order of when I do which one. So they actually have to listen to what everybody in the group says. But it's nice that they get to do it in different ways. Another one, what do they like better, werewolves or vampires? And this one was very controversial too. And some didn't like either. And so it was an interesting conversation. Again, giving them an opportunity to be social and talk about things. And finally, which do they like better, summer or winter? Again, opportunities to be social, opportunities to talk to each other. This is another example of something that I was using to start out my Greek class after we did some Greek writing. Katie asked, how are these groups discussing? So for my my student, I would have my students discuss this in English, but then work on how to say it in Latin. So it would be just quick discussion in English, probably I'd give them 5 to 7 minutes to work on it, hear what each other says, and then they would be presenting to the class in Latin. That's a great question.
I guess what I actually meant was my district's using Google Meet and we can't do breakout rooms. So I'm assuming you're doing this through breakout rooms and Zoom?
Actually, I just have, most of my students are in the classroom, so they're actually talking to each other. And for students that are doing, and breakout rooms are coming, so get ready. Google Meet has already had them open in beta. So as soon as your district turns them on, you'll probably have Google Meet breakout rooms within the next few weeks. But yes, you can put students in breakout rooms for this. For my online students, that's what I do. For my Zoomers. And for my students in the room, I just pair them up in the room. That's a great question. And so I use Zoom when I teach, but Google Meet breakout rooms, if you use Google Meet, are coming very, very soon. They're already in beta. I already have them on mine. I know a couple of districts have already turned them on. So they're probably coming your way very, very soon. This is an activity that I would do with my Greek class after they've read something in Greek. And so the directions would be drag the place names to the correct column. I'm actually going to X out of this for 1 sec so you can see how to do this. Uh-oh. Reload file. Oh no, don't do this to me now. Hold on 1 second. So this would be something I might do after students are reading a passage in Greek. Oh, I don't want to go too far here. Okay. Oh, it looks like we have another question. Oh, good question. So when students are in the room, they would talk to each other. I would try to assign students based on their geography is what I call it. And so I have them talk to each other. My students can turn to the side. So I have them usually talk to the person next to them. And usually they don't turn around. We just have them talk to the kids next to them. That's a great point.
Isn't it like a giant, none of mine have any headphones or anything. We're all just like this. So then isn't it a giant mess of talk? Like they can't hear their other.
Oh, they mute themselves. They mute the Zoom call.
Oh, they mute the Zoom call. And then how do they hear each other?
Yes.
But how do they hear each other?
If they're not on, this is for students who are actually in the classroom.
Oh, there's my confusion. And then how do the Zoom kids do it?
They are in a breakout room and they have headphones on.
Ah, got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So this would be something I do with Greek after they read something. Again, put the directions in a different color to differentiate it for students. And this is something I actually kind of stole from my daughter's kindergarten class. They did a lot of these where they would drag, and my students really love this. And then what I can do is when I'm doing this, instead of doing the regular view, I go to grid view. So when I do this, I make a copy for each student so that I can see all of the students moving the little items at the same time, so that I can see which student, I assign each student a slide and it gets to hold students accountable because then I can see what they're doing. So that can be fun. Oh, I can't see, for some reason the chat just popped out of there. Can someone read me the question in the chat?
Well, Jennifer just said that she's starting in person at the end of November, so she's not sure of the rules yet. What's going to be for her kids. You know?
All right.
So, Maureen, can I do one more follow-up question? I love your idea of using grid view to see the whole class doing theirs at once. So, so do they also put a name on there somewhere so you can figure out who did it? Because I've been having kids turn these in separately in Google Classroom so I could track whose was whose. That's kind of annoying, but
yeah, no, I don't do, I used to do that. It was just too much. So what I do now is I create a slide, and I'll show you, I do it something like this, like I do for this other slide. And so I assign every student a slide number. And I also, in addition, use plus adds. So what I do is I go to comment on the slide, I put the @ sign, and then I write the student's email, and it assigns them to their slide. So they each have a slide that's assigned to them.
oh, wait, can you show us that again? Because that is amazing and I've never seen that before.
Oh yeah, sure. Okay. So when you're clicking on that slide, go to comment, press the @ and then all the emails will come up if you're sharing it with your organization. And then you can click on a student email and click assign. And then when you press assign, students get an email that is a slide that they are assigned to.
That's great.
I think I'm in love with you right now, Maureen. That is like the awesomest thing ever, because that makes it so much faster to review all of that.
Oh
and then you don't have to worry about the kids being like, is that my slide? Is that your slide? Look, he was on my slide.
And so I have it again, this is redundant, but it helps students so much. So I do assign slides this way. I have a slide that has all of the slides, and I do this. So it's kind of a double backup. So students can't say, hey, no, he did my slide and it was slide 3 and I did slide 2, because you have this telling them which slide it is, and you've added all of their emails. So they can't argue with you over which slide was theirs.
I'm sorry, just one last thing. I'm assuming you have sort of like a template that you use for all this, so you don't have to do all this again and again, or you have to assign the slide each time you do one of these.
It's really easy. I just make one slide and then I just copy and paste the slide over and over again for something like a drag and drop. So I would do on my Mac Command C, and then I just Command V, Command V, Command V for something like this, where it's my Greek class, I do it 6 times. For a class like this, I do it 18 times. So it's really easy. As soon as I make one, it can make tons more slides.
And you're not reinventing the wheel constantly. You have something you know works.
Yeah.
You can just say, okay, this works. I know my kids are trained to do it now, because now they understand what you want from them.
Right. And a lot of times, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I said. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so then they can, for this particular slide, they would drag these. Whoa, there we go. And so they could drag all of these. And so, for example, Sparta is a city and the Nile is a river. So they can drag these. Oh, that's an island, not a river. There we go. I'm glad I'm reading the Greek well. Oh, I see questions. Okay. Yeah. Yep. And so it's interesting. I do this not only for categories like this, but I've actually started with my upper level classes and my AP classes, having them sort things like, for example, for AP, when they were doing the storm, I was having them sort them into different words for water, clouds, and sky, and just sort those. For other things, I've had them sort grammar topics. If we're going over things, like let's sort it into these are the indirect statements, these are the purpose clauses, and just have the different ones all up around. So there are many different ways to use this, and my students say that there's something very satisfying about doing this, and it's nice because I can track their progress. I'll show you another one that I did. This was based on a reading. Again, I have a title and I have directions. And again, I have the slide, but I also assign the slides to the different students. And so for this one, they had to take the images, and this I should have mentioned before, if you use shapes and images, it is so much easier to drag. So for example, for Apollo, I would drag the sun. For Jupiter, I would drag the lightning bolt. For Mercury, I would drag the thief. For Apollo, I drag music, etc., etc. And so this was really fun, and I could see if they read this. This was This is for John Folk's novella, Mercurius if Omnes Ferator. And so this was really fun to see if they did the reading and to check in with them, see how they're doing, see if they understood everything. Another thing I do, so the ones I just showed, River, City or Island and God Match would probably be done individually, but they'd be something that's kind of like a can do when students come into the classroom or come in virtually. And so this would be something that students would do in groups. This was a resounding hit the last 2 weeks, the quote game. And I stole this from Lance P. a long time ago, but this is something I've adapted a little bit for online learning. So using quotes from the last 2 chapters in novella, find quotes for each situation, and you may not repeat what another group has said. You can see that they didn't follow directions here. Again, I had to assign groups to make sure that they all knew which group they were in. And then I had a quote. So for example, this one's the title of a new show on Netflix. And so originally all of these shapes were off the slide. So I had these all off the slide so that then students had to move them onto the slide as soon as they had come up with an answer. So they all found quotes to do this. And I'm starting the Green Book with Latin 2 next week. And that's one of the first activities we're going to be doing with the Green Book. So if you want stuff from that, let me know. Again, something better said as Darth Vader, the worst word, which was really interesting to hear their reasoning behind that. A line from an action movie, something you don't want to overhear, and caption this photo. So this was really fun, a great kind of group activity. Again, giving students that opportunity to bond and go through things. Another group activity I've had students do recently was this haunted house. So I decided it would be a fun idea. We were reading Pliny's Haunted House from the amazing new Emma Vanderpool novella. And I created something that was based on it. It was a choose your own adventure. And one of the cool things about Google Slides is you can actually link slides to other slides really easily. So I was having students read Latin and then demonstrate their comprehension by picking a choice. So yes, Athenodorus should buy the house, and then link it to slide 3, and then it comes to here. And then decide what they want to do. And then I told them everything led to a happy ending, but sometimes the happy ending was for Athenodorus, but sometimes it was for the vampire, and sometimes it was from the wolves that ate him, and sometimes it was for other things. And so they had a grand old time doing this for about 15 minutes and going through and doing different scenarios and talking through, while they're reading the Latin, talking in English about which one they should do. And it was a really fun activity for them to reflect on the reading and figure out what they would do next. I have a blank template of that if you wanted to use it to create your own. I just want to give you a caveat. It takes a long time to do. And then it's a little bit, so it takes a while, and the kids do it a lot faster than it takes to make it. So it does take a little extra time, but I would say that my students really demonstrated comprehension by doing that, which has been nice. Okay, so games. Games are another great way to engage students. Who here uses Kahoot?
Hey, everybody.
I like Kahoot a lot. My students really like Kahoot. Something that I do that's a little bit of a different spin on Kahoot is that I have students pick a theme for the day. So for example, this week has been all Halloween stuff. So the Monday was everyone's favorite candy. Tuesday was, what would you dress up for Halloween if money was no object and you could buy any costume you wanted? Another was favorite things about fall. And someone disturbingly said everything dying, but I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go with it. But whatever. And so it's been fun doing themes. And that way students don't feel called out if they put their name and then they lose, or even sometimes they win. And so it's nice that they can use that. And I've made, oh my gosh, so many, like hundreds of Kahoots at this point. So it's nice. I also use the jumble feature to have students put things in order, which has been really cool too. So if students are reading something, having to put them in order has been nice. And so here's a sample Kahoot. I really also like that Kahoot uses rich text. For this particular one, if I were to make it again, I would actually use underline instead of italicize, because I know now from my research that if you're using italics, it's actually not great for the students who who have learning differences, I think using something like bold is probably a better choice. So if I were to do it again, I would do it like that. But I also like doing Kahoots where I provide students with the text and then ask questions. So something like this would be a multiple choice that I would hand out to students. I would give them about 10 minutes to take a look at it, and then we would play the Kahoot in class. And so students would have the text up on the screen at the same time they had it in their hand. So I would try to send this the night before to students. So if they're at home, they can print it for themselves. Or if they're in school, I would have my co-teacher print it for them before class. So that's something that's really helpful. Again, kind of grounding everything in the text. And I also do this with pictures. I've been doing Kahoot with picture responses this year, which has also been a resounding hit with students. And they can also be assigned as homework now, so if you have a premium account. And if you keep going through and say, just let me use the premium account, they've been letting me use the premium account for about a month after they told me they'd stop letting me use it. So let's hope that continues for a little while. Quizlet has been my go-to this year. I think more than anything, I've come to appreciate and love how great Quizlet is for students, not just for things in class, but also for students to review on their own. When I'm doing asynchronous work with students, I find Quizlet's probably their go-to for a number of reasons. Number one, they can have it on their phone and they can go through it whenever they want. It's like carrying around flashcards. But I also don't just use it for flashcards. I use it for a lot of other things. So I wanted to show you what I use it for that's not flashcards. And some of you have seen my Quizlet presentations before. So if you want links to any of those, I have hour-long presentations and half-hour-long presentations for different Quizlet things, so let me know if you need those. But here's just a couple of examples. This is a map Quizlet that I did with students this week. And the cool part is you don't actually have to define it. You can just use a map. So here, students are just saying different spots in the map in Greek. And so that's pretty cool. And so I'd have students play Quizlet Live with that. I'd have students play games. And you probably already know this, but when you have students do Quizlets on their own, you can create a class in Quizlet so that you can follow students' progress and see what they're doing. Another thing that you can do is describe the different options to students. They can do learn, write, and test asynchronously on their own, untimed, which is really nice. And then I have some students, I don't know if you might, who are very motivated by competition. And so doing something like match can be really, or the other one, what's the other one? Gravity can be really helpful, because if you're doing match or gravity, it's not available, unfortunately, with this diagram option. Students can go try to beat each other's scores. And so that's pretty fun for them as well. I think that can be really exciting for some students. Here's an example of how I might use text in context. So here I have a passage that I have put in there, and it's interesting. With Quizlet, it's hard to put in a passage something that you just find online for an image. So what I end up doing a lot of the time is screenshotting things and then putting them in. I find that can be much more helpful. So here is something that I put in there. Let me just see how I can edit it. What am I doing? Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm not logged in as me, that's why. Okay. I'm logged in as the other me. I have too many Quizlet accounts, clearly. Give me 1 second. Sorry. So when you know you've been using a thing, I have 2 Kahoots too. Here we go. All right, so let me open that up again so I can show it to you. So what I would do here is I would add this, it's a screenshot, and then I would edit it so that I'm blocking out things. So using this little world thing, I'm blocking out parts of text. And so what I would want here is predictive text. I want students to tell me what should be in this blurred out part. So I would put different words that I think students should put in the blurred out part of the text. You can do this for any text if you take a screenshot and put it in there. Now I found that this is a really good way to have students demonstrate their comprehension skills, and also to have students show that they have read it enough to understand what should come next. So this is a really fun way to kind of review a text with Quizlet. It looks like, do we have more questions? Okay. Okay, so
what do you mean by blurred out? Sorry, there I am blurting out. Blurred out text. Oh, blurred out. B-L-U-R-R-E-D. Is that it? Blurred.
Yeah. But when
Got it.
what I can do is I can actually blur the text
Got it.
by doing that, and then I can put it block and it'll go away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Here is another thing. So I really like that of all of the different social media apps, you can use more rich text on Quizlet than other things. And so here I'm asking all questions in context, and I'm using the highlighting features when I can. So that's really important. I think being able to do things that are bold, highlight, underline. I also like that they have for highlighting, they have pink, a blue, and a yellow. So that if you have students that are colorblind or students that have kind of color issues, it's easier to use things that will be beneficial for them. And so that's something I really like. I also like using the underline. I think that's really nice, and that helps students that might not be able to see italics or bold as easily. So there's a lot of really good things there. And finally, I've been using lately some more pictures in Quizlet. So this is similar to the diagram function where I put in the text and where I put in the map. But for this, I was using a picture and having students figure out what the labels might be on the picture. And so students would then have to figure out what each thing is. And I have it here defined, and I have it in the Greek. So students would play that and try to figure it out. And I've done this with other pictures as well, such as pictures from the Aeneid or pictures of Roman bathhouse. I have a bunch of different ones that I've tried over the years, and students seem to really like that. So I think that's nice. And again, trying to provide the words and the definitions for something like this, whereas for the map, I just provided the Greek. So sometimes I like to do just the target language to the picture, but sometimes I'll do target language to L1 to the picture, just depending on what I'm doing. And so that's it for Quizlet. I have tons of more stuff for Quizlet. So if you feel like you haven't heard enough about Quizlet, let me know. Another thing, so there are options for asynchronous timed and untimed review for students, but also who's used Quizlet Live? Okay, if you haven't used Quizlet Live, it is so much fun. And now there's an individual option as well. So students can individually use Quizlet Live and kind of go against each other. And like Kahoot, when I have students pick categories, Quizlet automatically gives students an animal to be. And so they get that anonymity so that they don't feel singled out because they are already anonymous. And so that's really nice. I like that about Quizlet very much. Another thing I've been using a bit of is Flippity. Has anyone used this before? There's a lot of different things for Flippity. And so basically what it does is it takes spreadsheets and makes them happy. So I'll talk about what that means in a second. So here is what it would look like as you're creating a Flippity. This is my favorite type of Flippity. This is called a quiz show. And so you add in all of these things for the template, and then very important, you have to publish it to the web, which is something you can do under File here. Then you can see under the tab, Get Link here, it will give you a link to the Flippity. And then it will create a Jeopardy style quiz show. Now, I've been doing this in a classroom where I have students online and I have students in person. So how do I do this? I can't put them in breakout rooms because they all have to see the game board at the same time. So I've been pairing up students in person and in the classroom who have each other's phone numbers so they can text each other. And so they can text each other the answers. And then all of the teams have to use the Zoom chat feature to let me know what their answer is. Because I like to give all of the groups an opportunity to respond. I don't like to say only the first person gets the points, which I know is not the Jeopardy way, but it's the way I do it in my Latin classroom. So the students will all send me a message. And when I was using Google Meet, I had students email me, which was cumbersome, but it was also nice because my students love Jeopardy. And so this was a way we could do Jeopardy virtually in a way, and they could all be engaged. So that's fun. If you haven't seen Flippity, there are a bunch of different things you can do with it. There's a random name picker. My students really like the scavenger hunt, but there's a lot of different things you can do on Flippity, and they just keep adding things. So feel free to take a look and kind of play around with that if that's something you're interested in. If you have kids who are interested in badges, you can do a badge tracker. There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is something that I think is probably the most important tenet of hybrid learning. And so I think what we should do when we're doing hybrid learning is make sure our students have lots of input from us and also have an opportunity for us to look at their output and keep it going. Lots of small formative assessments, few summative assessments, which is not the way I usually do things. I think I'm about to finish a quarter, and for each class, I've done 1 or 2 summative assessments. Most of the things I've done are small, either little grades or ungraded formative assessments to try to track where everyone is. And I feel like my comments are going to be more important than the grades at this point to try to figure out where all students are. So that's been really important. I think the feedback loop is something we have to focus on, not just during hybrid learning, but all of the time, but especially during hybrid learning, because students aren't getting input on how they're doing, and we're not getting input from our students on how they're doing, and we can't give that input. They don't know what's going on. So this is really important. My number one go-to for this is Pear Deck. I do a Pear Deck almost every day with my students using Google Slides. I always use it as the add-on for Google Slides because I love Google Slides. As you can see, I've done tons of stuff with Google Slides. Google Slides, I stole this from someone, is a Swiss Army knife of the Google Suite. You can do everything with it. I love it. I've used everything else, but this is my favorite. And so using Pear Deck with that is really, really helpful. And I like using asynchronous mode. I should say asynchronous, whoops. There we go. Asynchronous mode, because it can help students to work at their own pace. I find that sometimes students who are under time pressure get to a place where they're too stressed. And right now, their level of stress is pretty high. So the more we can take away that level of stress and let them work at their own pace when they're working individually, I find the better. So for me, having students work asynchronously on Pear Deck works the best. And they don't show each other's names. They get to work slide by slide. And now Pear Deck has that wonderful feature where you can type answers back and forth so that when students write something, you can respond to them, which is great. So that if students are writing something that's not correct, you can give them feedback on it. Or if it's correct, they want me to say optime or yuge or something like that to indicate that they did a good job. Again, providing that quick feedback. Some teachers have been saying it's hard to give comments that quickly. So something I've been trying to do in advance is create a Google Doc with a list of comments and then just do copy paste if I can. So that can be really helpful as a trick to answer questions quickly. And so here would be an example of a Pear Deck. And I like to start out with the stress tests or the stress, kind of figuring out how they're doing. And so this is an optional thing that I would put at the beginning of a Pear Deck, a stress check. And I would say probably 75%, 80% of the students do it, but it's also really helpful for me to know, are students in a good place today? Are students in a place where they're not feeling so good today? I think it's really important for me to know that at the beginning of class, kind of taking the temperature of the room and seeing how students are doing, because there might be times when they're under more stress. I know this week my students are incredibly stressed out. And so they're either very quiet or bouncing off the walls in my class because it's the end of the quarter. And so being able to see how they're doing can be really important. Also having them share something. And again, not making them, not forcing them, but giving them the opportunity to share something about what could be filling their bucket today and what could be draining it. Is it Latin class? Is it your math test you took last period? Is it you're really hungry and need to go to lunch? Like, what's going on with you right now? I think just being able to know that can be really, really helpful. When I would do a Pear Deck, I would probably do a mix of things. So I'd have students write, I have students match, but a lot of times I like to have students draw. I think drawing can be really fun and it can be different for students from what they do all day. So having them do something like draw what Jupiter feels and like a big happy face or a sad face, or in this case, an angry face. I got some very good angry faces for this one. Another one is, why does Jupiter feel this way? This would be a written response. And again, they would use the Latin on the bottom of the slide for this. I've done it both ways. I've had students read the Latin on the slide, or I've asked the Pear Deck question on a separate slide right after they read the Latin. It just depends on what I'm trying to do in class that day. And I would also ask for translations for students in context, little bits. I don't have them do a big translation, but just to make sure they're understanding different words in context. And so more of the same. Again, Google Slides, my favorite. It is the Swiss Army knife of the Google Suite. I love it. Here's another thing I like to do with students, cartoons. So if you want this template, let me know. So what I have students do is add a slide and then add their cartoon from a Google Drawing template that I use. And I took out all the students' names, which is why it's going to say click to add title. But then they would actually pick lines from the story that they thought were the most representative of what's going on. And I've done this with lots of stories from Cambridge where students will pick lines and put them in to tell the whole story again, and then use their own Google pictures to say what's going on. And so it's really fun. The students enjoy it. I have them do it in groups. And with something like this, I can see in gallery view all of the students working on their cartoons at once. So that's really nice. So I can see what they're doing. I can give them help if I need it by using the comments or the chat. And so that's really helpful. Here's some more types of Google Slides that I like to do with students. These are student-made Google Slides. This one is from last year, so I don't have it as, I just assigned slides. It wasn't, oh no, sorry, Gallery View is not on Pear Deck. The cartoons were something different. I use Gallery View for other things. And so this would be assigned to students, and then they would illustrate, color code to show they understand the grammar, and give vocabulary. So as they're reading through, they would illustrate the slide, they would color code the line. I would have all the lines in advance, and then students would put vocabulary that they had to look up. Then as a class, we would go over the slides and we would write the translation in the speaker notes so that all students had shared notes. I find that shared notes can be really, really helpful for students to keep them grounded in what's going on. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Maureen. That sounds great, but I'm a little confused. So do students do this individually or is this as a group? So each student assigned one slide in the group slide?
Each student assigned one slide or two slides, depending. So it's not group. This is not a group work. This is for me to give them feedback to see how they're doing. So this is part of the feedback loop where I would be giving feedback to individual students. So to demonstrate their understanding of grammar, oh, sorry, go ahead. Question?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Let me just shut up when I need to. I've also been doing lots of small assignments, but then those small assignments tend to outweigh things. So all my kids right now look like they have amazing grades, even though that might not be what they would normally have. Are you just, that's just life right now and we move on, or have you found a system to work with that too?
That's a really good question. Number one, it's kind of life right now, and it's really pushing me towards standard-based grading. So both things. I think when I'm doing tasks with students, I really have to be mindful about different tasks. So I've been trying to do, when I do those small formative assessments, and I could do a whole other presentation on this, I've been trying to break it down into tasks. So interpretive tasks, interpersonal tasks, and presentational tasks. So I've been trying to do that so that at least when their grades are sky high, I can give comment feedback on each of their skills. I've also been giving investigative tasks, which are kind of like cultural exploration tasks for students. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in the choice board in a minute or two. But yes, grades are sky high, and it's making me wonder about the grading system and should we be changing to something that is more representative of student skills by assessing and looking at more at student skills. So that's my own take on it. I don't know the right answer necessarily, but that's something I've been thinking about a lot and something I'd like to move toward more. So anyway, this is an example of a Google Slide students might do on their own. So I could give them feedback as they're translating, as they're illustrating, and as they're giving grammar by color coding. This is another one that students did. This is a Greek class has been taking Greek for all of 7 weeks. And they did an amazing job on this. They were assigned individual slides, and they were talking about geography. And this is just a particular, again, you can see how I assigned using comments. Some of them went really all out with this, which is really fun using, they can use stop motion, they can use different animation things if they really want to get into it. And so that's been really fun for them. So it's interesting. There's a lot of different ways to use it. Another way to get feedback is through Google Forms. Something I've been doing this year that I wish I'd been doing all along actually are end of week check-ins. And I just wanted to share this with you. I'm doing this every week, and I had to teach 45 students, and usually I get 20 to 30 responses, which is amazing. And so students share their name. They tell me how I know them, how I'm doing stuff with them. They say how they're feeling. They talk about what they learned. They talk about what they are successful with. They talk about what they want to work on. whether or not they completed their assignments, what they would like their teacher to know, and how I can help them. So by doing these check-ins weekly, it has been so helpful to me as a teacher. I think just knowing what my students need has been really helpful. That part where telling your teacher what you need has been awesome. I think just knowing from students what they're going through and what they need has been so helpful to me, and seeing how students are doing. I have some students that are having a bad week, and then I can reach out to them and see how I can support them, because it's really important to make sure we know how students are doing if they feel comfortable sharing with us. And so that's something that's been really, really valuable for me. Yes, actually the link is in this, but I can also share it with you if you email me. The last thing that I want to talk about a little bit before student choice and voice is assessment. Assessment has a lot of different things for online learning, and I just have a couple of notes on assessment. Assessment for content knowledge, not the assessment type. Sometimes when we're using new assessments for technology, students aren't really sure how they're being assessed. They're just not sure of the thing yet. So what I do is, if I'm using new technology, or even if I'm not, I give students a full practice assessment before I give them an assessment. I've been doing this for years, and I think for me, it gives students a comfort level with exactly what types of questions will be on the assessment, and lets them know what taking that assessment is going to feel like. And I think this is really important because we want to assess on content, not how well they take a test. So it's really important to make sure that they are centered in that. Also, giving students opportunity for corrections. I always let students do test corrections. I think it's really important to let them do test corrections, or sometimes people even do retakes. I haven't quite gone on that train yet, but I'm thinking about it. Also, assess what students know. Don't do things that are terribly hard because you're afraid that students' grades are too high. Only focus on what students know. We're assessing them on what they don't know. Of course, they're going to get it wrong. Make sure you're focusing on what you did cover and what students do know. Also, explain why you're doing what you're doing. As you go through the practice assessment, if you're doing vocabulary and context, explain why you're doing that. If you're asking questions that are reading comprehension questions, why are you asking these types of questions? What is the purpose? If students don't know why they're being evaluated in a certain way, they're not going to care as much. But if you tell them why you're doing what you're doing, they care more and they're more invested in it. So those are my tips for assessment. And I've been using Google Forms a little bit for assessment. And this is what a typical quiz might look for me on Google Forms. So this would be an example of an AP style short answer quiz. I have a bunch of these. I really like using Google Forms in a lot of ways because you can do quiz mode, so you can put answers. There's just a lot of different cool things about Google Forms. However, I have recently found GoFormative. And oh, one more thing, quiz mode is great, and now it's secure. Some people were concerned in the spring because Google Forms had a glitch where students could go look at the source code and figure out all of the answers. That has been fixed. So unless your student is, I don't even know what kind of hacker, they can't do that anymore. But it used to be super simple to look at the source code for the Google Form website and see all the answers. So if you're using it in the spring, students may have been taking advantage of that, but that has now been fixed if you are using Google Forms. Right now, I've been using GoFormative. I really like it. There is a free version, and this is a sample type of assessment. And one of my favorite, and I just want to show you quickly. Oh, I don't want to show that. I want to show the actual assessment. So what I would do is I would actually put a document form version of the assessment on there first, so they don't have to scroll back and forth. I also have a printed version, or a version that students can print for each assessment, so they don't have to scroll back and forth. I find that to be the most challenging for everyone. So I have students answer questions. I put possible answers. I put in the points. And the greatest part is when students are taking the assessment, I can actually go in and write messages to them. So I can give them that immediate feedback as they're taking the assessment. And so if students are messing something up, if they do something, yes, Judy, thank you. GoFormative will tell you if they're copied and pasted as well, which is really nice. So there's a lot of really good things about GoFormative. And there's a good free version, which I like. So check it out. It's cool, it's secure, and I really like that you can give that feedback back and forth. So it's a feedback that you would give to a student when you used to be able to walk up behind them and look at their paper while they were taking an assessment, but now you can do it online. So that's pretty cool. Google Classroom questions are another way that I've assessed students. I've had them use Latin evidence to answer questions. And so this would be an example of something that's kind of an AP style essay that I would then have students answer questions on. And so it's pretty cool. I really like that I can see students are almost writing an essay, but them responding to each other. So it's a debate, but it's in class and it's written. And I found that in the spring, when I was trying to do debates, it was advantageous for students who like to talk. And a lot of students who felt less comfortable talking on Zoom got left out. And so by doing it through Google Classroom questions and allowing students to respond to each other and ground it in Latin evidence, they could have really productive debates and go back and forth. And so if you'd like a template for this, let me know. Finally, student choice and voice. I think centering, I'm gonna look for questions. Okay, all right. So I think it's really interesting for student choice and voice, making sure students are able to have some choice in what they're doing has been really essential for me, because I found students were more apt to do things if they had a little more choice. And if I had more time tonight, I'd go more into like the Fun 45 project I do and the tiny little mini research projects. But right now I just want to get into choice boards. So here are some choice boards I want to share in case you're interested that I was using in the spring. So one was a homework choice board, and different things were worth different point levels. Another thing that I did for homework choice boards is a homework choice board, again, point levels, but all based on the same text. And finally, this was my final assessment for students, where they did an interpretive task, an interpersonal task, a presentational task, and an investigative task. And so students chose one from each column to indicate their learning and knowledge from what we were learning in class at that time. And so this was when we were reading Cambridge, and we were also reading the novella Coelia at the same time. We were reading Green Book. I think it was the one where it's where they are in Rome and they're making the Arch of Titus. So
Katie would like to know, how do you balance the chat box, your video, and your presentation?
Excellent question. I was using 2 screens a lot in the spring, but I've become very adept at kind of jumping all around. But in the spring, it was great because I would sign into Zoom twice on my devices, so that one was for presentation and the other one was for managing chat. I just keep chat up all the time for the most part, so that I can see what's going on. Even though it distracts what I'm seeing, it will distract what the students are seeing, so that I can see how they're doing. That's a great question. This is the choice board my students are doing right now. They're doing Classes Lava. I stole this from online. I'm not sure who I took it from. I'm sorry, I can't attribute it. But students are selecting activities to move furniture pieces. Again, just trying to make the choice board a little more fun for them. And then they have to move their person across. And so here's an example of different choices they could make for the choice board. So these things would be worth a chair, these things would be worth a love seat, these things would be worth a table, and the bed would be worth 4 squares. And so each square is basically equivalent to 20 points. And students understood what was expected for each of these things. And students had a lot of fun with this. I gave them about 3 weeks to work on it, and it was really fun for them. I did find some students that were not as great with long-term assignments, ended up doing it the night before, which was very challenging despite many, many reminders. But I did find that for a lot of students, it was really helpful to have choice. And so my next one, I think, is going to be a bingo board. So we'll see how that goes. I'm presenting those next week to the students. So I am almost out of time, but I am here to answer questions. Please feel free to reach out. In a normal year, I'd say come by Kingswood, Oxford if you're ever in West Hartford, but I'm not there right now. Feel free, though, to email me or contact me on Twitter. I am happy to share. I'm happy to give templates